Okay, well, how's everybody doing? Can everybody hear me okay? Somebody just give me a shout out if you can hear me okay today.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, good. I think we'll go ahead and get started. And it looks like we have a good sized crowd here to start out with, so that's good. And I'm going to start the class. And probably what I'll do, I'm standing right here at the computer. We'll do that for every class session as we get going. I just wanted to sort of make this a case in which I can see what's going on, make sure I can see people arriving. If we had any technical issues, I could sort of arrive at that. But what I plan to do is, and it looks like most people made it to the class. Looks like we've got a good amount of attendance there. That's good. I sent out the link to this about 30 or 40 minutes ago, and I would have sent it earlier. Unfortunately, I just got the room assignment for this class yesterday, and I'm not on campus on Tuesday, so I didn't know what the setup was and all that. So I apologize if it's a little bit late. I am going to record this class session. I'm not really supposed to for this particular class because it's considered online. And in other words, it's a regular class session held from 3 to 4:15 on Wednesday. The only difference is that you're wherever you are, and I'm here, and whatnot. So that's a little bit different there. But I just got the setup yesterday, and so and this is the first I've been in the classroom, and unfortunately we've had some glitches with the equipment. But it looks like we were pretty much error-free this time, so that's good. And I'll post a link to this particular section today. A lot today. I want to get into primarily talking a bit about the class setup, how it works. I know that this is an introductory class. It's a 100 level course. So probably a lot of you are new to this particular kind of format, maybe new to C&M, maybe new to college in general. So if right now you're having a little bit of challenges either accessing this in the live feed or whatever, or getting your book or whatever, try to take it easy because we're not moving that quickly this week. The only real activity we have is a discussion activity, which you can go into and post. I'll talk about this week's discussion activity as to what that's about. I'll talk about all the activities in the class here in just a few minutes, so everyone is familiar with what's going on and how this works. This is going to look a lot like a regular class that you were sitting in, just that we're meeting once per week. And it's kind of a hybrid section since there are online activities and you should be connected to the Brightspace system. You may have entered this course today through the link that I posted on the main page, or what they call the landing page in Brightspace. That's one way to get there. I also emailed it to everyone. And I don't know if it's going to be the same link every time. So I will try to post that as soon as I can for you. But if you're coming in at 2:55 on Wednesday and you say, oh gosh, I need to get set up, that link, you could use link over. If it's the same link every time, because this is an enterprise version of Zoom that I don't work with as much as I do like the home game, but it usually copies the same link every time. If it's different, it's no big deal. Just click on the link. Looks like everybody made it okay. You can have your cameras on for yourself. You can have them off. It doesn't matter. I'd kind of like for everybody to maybe mute your mics, which looks like most of you have anyway. But if you have questions, just feel free to interrupt. I mean, this is not a class. I think there are 22 of us enrolled all together. Looks like we have about 15 right now. Looks like a couple of people might have dropped off for some reason, but maybe they'll be back. But I'll describe what the course is about, and hopefully everybody now is well familiar with Zoom, that you've been working with something like Zoom, and I know there are all kinds of different versions, whether it's Skype or Microsoft Teams or Cisco WebEx. There are a lot of different versions we use. I think all of them here, but I kind of prefer Zoom because I think it's sort of the default that most people are familiar with, and I know that even my family is all spread out all over the country. We all use Zoom to get together, so I think, and probably maybe that some of you do the same thing. Well familiar with that as well. It seems to be easy to work with, and most people are familiar with what's going on. So anyway, let me go ahead and get started in the class. Does anybody have any questions for me before we get going? Feel free to ask any questions, and because there may be some things that I don't get to today, and I want to make sure that everybody has. If you do. Okay, well, that's fine. This is not a class in which I'm going to be pulling out somebody individually and say, hey, I want you to answer this particular question. I don't even do that so much in my physical face-to-face classes. And so I think you'll find this to be a fairly relaxed setup. This course has been around a long time, actually. It's not one of the prerequisite courses for business schools, but it is a pretty good class. And for just to introduce students to what economics is all about. And it's not going to be hugely technical. There's not going to be really any math. I can't think of any math at all that we'll be working with. And so if you have math anxiety, that's one thing that you shouldn't have to worry about at all. We do tend to get into that more in the microeconomics and macroeconomics courses that most students take, particularly those who are using those as prerequisites for business school or other further courses down the road that require those, but those will be much more quantitative than this will be. This is primarily just an overview. Why it's called a survey. A survey course is just simply an introductory course that just sort of samples different things that are going on and in economics and what are the current events, what are some to know if you do have an interest at all in economics, and what are some of the things that will make you aware of what economics is all about. That's really what the goal is for this particular course, is to sort of introduce you to some of the topics and concepts. Okay, so if there are any questions, and if you do have questions, feel free to just give me a shout out. It's not here to the no pun intended to the screen here. And I don't know if I'll be using this particular setup going forward. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know if it's going to work for you or not. I know that everyone's got access to the syllabus. It should be available. You can either view it on your screen. It kind of comes in a weird format. It sort of aligns itself to the left when you pull it up on Brightspace. I don't know why it does that. But if you on that page, how you get there is to go in the Brightspace course site. And if you're not familiar with how to do that, get with me individually, send me an email and say, hey, I can't find out how to get to Brightspace. Basically, if you just m.edu and you up at the top left, there'll be, I think it'll say CNN Brightspace. It'll be pretty obvious. You click on that, and then you use your same user ID and password in order to get onto that system. So it should be fairly straightforward. Then Survey of Economics, the section number is T51. T51 is the section. It's the only Survey of Economics course that you should be seeing because it's the only one being offered in the fall semester. So, and then once you log in, you'll see the Zoom link. And then if you go to coursework, coursework is one of the main tabs, because I know this is a hybrid course. You'll be working both in Brightspace as well as attending class in real time, 3 to 4:15 every Wednesday, just once per week, okay? And I'll talk about what the logic and the organization are of when we do what we do during the week and why it's set up the way it's set up. But you'll see the Zoom link. But if you go to coursework and then click on, I think it's overview and syllabus, you should, coursework content, that's what it is, coursework content. I'm not actually looking at it right now. And then you'll see overview and syllabus. You can see it there. If you scroll to the bottom, you can download it. If you just want to save a copy as it's a Word document. You can save it for yourself if you like. You can print it or whatever you want to do. And go from there. But I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about it. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to sing out and say, hey, what's going on? I don't understand this, I don't understand that. And I'll be more than glad to try to answer your questions. And I've been doing this a long time. And so there's probably nothing that I really can't answer in terms of what to do here at CNN, where to go, how to get your book, how to do all that. So, but if I don't know, I'll just say, I don't know, and I'll find out. And we'll get the answer for you. I think you'll find me to be as available as any instructor. I don't have anywhere else to go. I'm here all the time. And so, and I'll talk about my office hours here in a minute. But let's spend a little time going over the syllabus. I know a lot of instructors do that. I know some students think, oh gosh, I could read it. I don't need you to go over it. But I do want to sort of elaborate as to some of the main issues that we're talking about here on the syllabus. So the course, it's a full-term course. It runs all the way to so it's from the first week to last. We have a lot of courses around 12 weeks, 8 weeks, 7 weeks, etc. But this is runs full-term. That's kind of good for you because it kind of takes it at a fairly leisurely pace. And again, the class meets every Wednesday, 3 to 4:15. Since Wednesdays are not a holiday, we won't be having any days off. I did adjust next week's timing of the activities to accommodate the fact that we are losing Monday for the Labor Day holiday. So I've sort of staggered everything for next week. And I'll talk about those timing issues here in just a minute. But my class is held, excuse me, here at 3 o'clock via Zoom. And and then the course CRN is there, 7565. Oh, by the way, I should say one thing. If there's anybody you know who needs to register or wants to get into this class, there is still room. It's not, in fact, we could probably handle 100 more people if we wanted to. It's a Zoom setup. So, but if you know anybody, have them get with me, but have them do it fairly quickly so that I can enter a late registration override to allow them to do it. It's not a big deal at all, but I usually handle this before the term starts, but this course did not completely fill up, but we've got enough students that I think we have 22 students or 23, something like that. So that's kind of good. I'm encouraged by that. So my name is Tim Simpson. I've been here since 2006, I guess. I've been teaching for I taught at the university before I moved to New Mexico. My telephone, my extension here, if you dial the main number, 224-4000, my extension is 50689. I'm not always at my desk, and so feel free to leave me a voicemail there. Or you can send me an email as well. Now, what's weird about the voicemail system is it actually goes and creates an email, which I don't know why. It just does it for whatever reason. So if you leave me a voicemail, I'll see it on my email. Or you can just send me an email. That is perfectly fine. You can get with me that way if you like. And I'll try to get back with you as soon as I can. My email address is right below that. It's tsimpson11@cnn.edu. My office is here in Smith Rush, which is where I am right now. I'll be on the second floor. So for those of you who are familiar with Smith Brasher, and it's on the main campus, and we're located right off University and I think Cole maybe. And if you come in through the main doors that face University, you go right up the stairs where that office structure right on the right there, where all the faculty administration offices are for the School of Business, Hospitality, and Technology. That's where we're located. My office hours are 2 to 3 on Wednesday. Now, I've got other courses that I'm teaching, but they don't start yet. So I do a lot of late start courses. I've got one starting in September. I've got 2 or 3 starting in October. And I will make those office hours available for those courses when I know them, so that if it's easier for you to come and see me on those times, I'll make those available. I just don't know when they're going to be yet. Courses haven't started. So, but I presume I'll still be in the same locations before. If you do come to campus, just remember to follow the COVID-19 protocol that we're still employing. There's a daily checklist that you should fill out. And please answer the questions honestly. We ask that you do that. I know that I have. And it was really terrible over the summer. And my wife had been out of town for in the last 14 days. And so I failed the test. And I did not pass the test. And so they said, don't come to campus. And my boss said, don't come to campus. And we worked around it. And so if you don't pass the test, don't come. But, we can work any kind of issue out over the phone or by email or whatever. I do kind of prefer email, only because of the fact that it just kind of sort of creates a record of what we talked about and when. And I don't really mean that in sort of a legalistic kind of way. Who said what when and all that. It's just, it kind of reminds me of what's going on. And, we may have, I don't know, maybe 3 Jameses in the class, and it's, and so sometimes it's like, I don't remember what this James and I talked about when and what are we talking about, and that's another thing on your emails. Just tell me what section you're in, if you would, because I've got a number of sections, and sometimes people say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and what do we do today, or whatever, and I'm happy to answer that. It'd be nice if you just told me what class you're in. Then it just saves some time. But email is kind of good. It's kind of efficient. It's the best way to handle that. So there's only one required text. It's the McConnell text, the 22nd edition. We have that at the bookstore here at CNN. It's about a couple years old. I know the publication date is 2021. It's been around for 2 years or so. So if you don't want to buy it here at the bookstore, feel free to get it wherever you want to get it. I would go used if I were you, although if you want to own it and whatnot, you wanted to do, that's your choice. If you want to get the electronic version, which I think is probably a smart way to go, get that. Or if you want to get it anywhere, Amazon, wherever, feel free to get it. Now, this ISBN number may differ, so don't worry about that. ISBN numbers are just simply numbers that are unique when you have different kind of formats, like an electronic, paperback, hardback, loose leaf. There are all kinds of different versions, so don't get overly worried about that. Okay, so that's nothing to be worried about. Now, this is actually the macro text. We're probably going to use something different as we go forward in this course, but I'm going to be only using a few of the chapters from that. You're going to find, I'll just tell you right now, that it's probably a bit technical, and don't get intimidated by that, because there's nothing that's going to go on any quiz or exam that won't be covered in class. So you won't be faced with some weird scenario from page 173 about something very, very technical and with lots of crazy graphs. That's not what's going to happen. So it's really for background mostly. So I wouldn't worry about that. One thing I know some students are doing is sharing texts. They've been doing that. I a lot of times forget to mention that if some whatnot, back and forth. That's a good way to sort of break the cost up a little bit. So that's entirely up to you. In terms of supplies, the only thing that we were really looking at here is to have a pretty good internet connection. We have, and I'll talk about the quizzes and exams here in a minute, and also the discussion activities. And that's really the only assessed activities in the course are exams, quizzes, and discussion activities. But there are no other outside supplies. I think the bookstore has like a recommended little plastic flyer. You can get that if you like. I don't know that I think I probably I don't know what it costs, but it's probably not that useful. But feel free. I can't tell you not to buy something, but I would say if it were me, I probably wouldn't get that much value out of it. But that's up to you. You do what you like as far as that goes. The main thing is to have good access to the internet. And I would sort of recommend using a computer, whether it's a laptop or desktop, as opposed to particularly as opposed to a smartphone or iPhone. Particularly when it comes to exams and quizzes. Now, if you want to access this with your iPhone, maybe you're at work, maybe you take your lunch at 3 o'clock on Wednesdays and whatnot, you want to view this course in Zoom on your phone. That's probably okay. But I don't think I would take a quiz. I think our results have not been good. We've had a lot of students with some issues and some visibility issues and some formatting of the way the questions appear on the screen. They are timed, and so you don't want to, get aggravated trying to, make that thing fit your screen and turning your phone this way or that way. I think it doesn't work well. Tablets may work. I'm a little less. I've got a tablet, but I've never actually used it on a Brightspace. I can't tell you whether tablets are as good as a laptop or a regular desktop. But I do know cell phones we've had some issues with. But I don't think there's any problem at all with viewing this course via cell phone. I think that's probably fine. I just think may not want to go that direction, but you can try it. And particularly the quizzes, you're allowed to take the quizzes as many times as you like. And so you say, okay, well, maybe I'll just give it a whirl. It's only 10 questions on the quiz, and I can take it multiple times. If it doesn't work on my cell phone, I'll go get to a computer. That's fine. If you want to do that, feel free to my experience. The Brightspace system, I think, is pretty easy to work with. And I think you'll find everything that you need there, with the exception of the text itself. And so you should be, as far as that goes. But if you have questions as to how to get there, let me know. Course description, this is right out of the catalog that is online. We'll talk about economic literacy. And basically, we're just going to be talking a lot about terminology in this course, what terms mean. We've all heard the terms supply and demand. We may have heard about topics like interest rates and inflation. And right now, the big economic story is inflation. I mean, we've had inflation like we've never had or haven't had in a good 40 years. And so that's a huge economic story right now. We'll be talking about that. And when I get to, I'll talk a bit about where we're going to go in terms of topics, and I will definitely leave some room to talk about that. And so that's intentional. We'll talk about different roles of governments, and I think that's important. One of the things that we talk a lot about everywhere in economics is where government fits into the picture. In fact, if you were to ask economists what are the biggest issues that divide economists, and I think it's safe to say that economists don't always agree. It's almost a joke among non-economists, the fact that we don't agree all the time. But that main dividing line is oftentimes, what is the proper role of government? What should government be doing? what government should not be doing. And it's a dividing line. And there is really no way to pull politics out of economics. And that's one of the things that I tell all my classes very early on is that we'll oftentimes cover topics in economics which are controversial. We'll talk about policies you may just not agree with. You may just think, oh, that's a terrible idea. Well, that's fine. And that's the way things are. We a lot of times are confronted with things that we don't really agree with, but that's just the way it is. We have to sort of work through it. But at least you'll know what's going on. At least you'll be informed. And being informed is better than being not informed. Okay, so that's one thing to think about there. Okay, so we'll talk about government, where it comes into play. We'll talk about economic causes of things and at the national and international level. One of the things I think is interesting, particularly for those of you who are interested in is that we'll have a lot more opportunity to talk about global economic issues, where frankly we just really don't in the other two classes, the micro and macroeconomic courses that most people take, particularly for prerequisites for business schools or certain graduate programs that people have to have that. We just don't like, wish we did, but we don't, but we will here. And we'll talk about things like global poverty. We'll talk about climate change and what this means to all of us globally. And I think that's something that we in business schools have a responsibility to, is to allow students to think more globally. And this is not anything new in the business world. Businesses have been thinking for many decades now about, we want leaders, business leaders who think globally. You don't just view the marketplace as being just the US, rather an international sort of view. And I think that that's, I would like for us to go here, okay? Student learning outcomes, I may adjust this a little bit. I'm not sure these are as updated as what they ought to be. And so if I make an adjustment, I'll send out a new syllabus, or I'll post a new one there. But these are some of the ideas. Attendance and tardy withdrawal policies, these are sort of hard and they're not, well, I shouldn't say they're hard and fast because they're really not. I don't know what I'll do. I'm trying to take attendance. And so if you're here on the Zoom link, Zoom actually captures your attendance and actually downloads it to an Excel file. So I'll have that. So there's no need to sign, obviously, because you're not here, but I'll be able to know that you're here and whatnot. And since this is not a class that typically has a recording of the class session, you won't be able to, to log in on Saturday or whatever. This is is meant to be in real time. I'm going to record this one just because, well, for one thing, we may still have people yet to join the class, right? Or people who have just gotten an override, just registered, but don't have a link yet to the Brightspace and they haven't been set up. So I want to make sure that everyone is on the same playing field, and that's why I didn't schedule much for week one, because I want to make sure everyone has a chance to get acclimated, knock down some doors within the Brightspace, get familiar with the system. If you've had a class of Brightspace before, it's not anything terribly different. The only thing is my discussions are on a different link than the actual coursework weekly module. I do that only because I want to keep those together, and so make sure that you are able to find the weekly discussions. But so you don't want to miss too many of these classes. I tend not to drop students from classes, and so if you plan to drop, and if you do, you do. It's not a huge deal. Maybe you want to retake it at the time. Maybe things are going on, and you'd rather do it again. Then you should do it on your own rather than expect me to do that. About the only time that I drop students is when somebody has just simply sort of gone missing, gone blank, haven't heard anything from that person. And I'm sort of doing those people a favor because it doesn't create any kind of 20-minute just because you weren't able to finish the class. You just much better just to withdraw for sure. Why put that on your transcript? It's, even though if you take it again, down your GPA, you don't really want that. So if you need to drop, go ahead and drop it. And then there's some more information about missing more than 15% of the class sessions, which works out to about 2 or 3 days, something like that. If you're auditing, then obviously you've got a different set of expectations there. Let's talk a bit about the grading. Hopefully everyone can see what I'm seeing here, or you can pull it up on your own. So there are going to be 2 exams in the class. You can think of them as midterm and final if you like, but they're just simply exam 1 and exam 2. Exam 1, I believe, is around week 8, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just make sure of that. I'll scroll down here a minute. I think it's week 8, which is about midway through class. Yes, it's week 8. I'll come back to that schedule here in a minute. And then the final exam is going to be the last week. So, and they're worth 100 points each. And so 40% are possible on the exams. They'll be taken in Brightspace. And so you'll see those, I'll post those as links within that week's course module. So that the course module is accessed by going into that main Brightspace page, clicking on coursework in the upper left, content, and then you'll see it'll be, all the weeks will be aligned on the left. It'll be pretty obvious how to get there. If it's not obvious, just give me a call. I'll walk you through it. And then from there, you just follow the directions as to take the exam. The exams will be timed at about, I think, 90 minutes. You might have, I think, a 5-minute grace period, but it'll be in 90 minutes and about 40 questions. So about 2.5 minutes per question. Since it's taken in Brightspace, you'll be able to use whatever resources you want, book, notes, whatever. That's entirely up to you to use whatever resources you're able to use. And I will talk more about the exams as we get closer to them. I just sort of encourage people not to rely too much on those, because sometimes I think open book exams are sort of a dual-edged sword in the sense that people get a little false sense of security. And so, and I know you've probably heard this from instructors, and maybe you believe it, maybe you don't believe it, but I can tell you, I think it's pretty much true. So, so kind of, be prepared. But the week before the exam, I'll talk about what the exam's about. And we'll go over that so that you'll have a good feeling as to what to know, what to be looking for. There are 6 quizzes that are on different weeks. Not every week we'll have a quiz. Not every week we'll have an exam. And there'll be 6 of those. And so those will be worth 20 points or 25 points each. So 30% of your total grade will be in the form of quizzes. The quizzes, unlike the exams, the quizzes you can take as many times as you like. The exams, you only have one opportunity to take them, so you want to make sure you're in a comfortable space when you take the exam, so because you'll that's your one shot. If you get knocked out, and we'll talk about this more as we approach exams. If you get knocked out, let me know. We'll get you back in, but then you have to start over again, so you probably don't want that. But quizzes is no big deal. You can take multiple times. I've had students. I had actually 2 students in one of my spring classes. They took one exam something like 47 times or something, and I think that was a record. I don't know that I would want you to do that, but it's unlimited, so there'll be no limit on the number of times you can take it. The quizzes will be available on the Monday of every class session. Now, they're not available this week because we're not scheduled to have a quiz for the reasons I mentioned a few minutes ago, that we may still have some people joining the class late. I don't want to put those folks at a disadvantage because, Thursday or Friday, suddenly they've got a quiz to do. So we can ease into this material a little bit, and I just don't want to accommodate them. But not every week will have a quiz. It'll be obvious from the syllabus schedule itself as to what's going on. There'll be multiple places in which you'll see what's going on. Okay, so the quizzes, they'll have 30 minutes, but there'll be unlimited numbers of opportunities. Those are usually 10 questions, usually multiple choice. But they'll be available on Monday, but you can do it up through this Sunday. So the work week, the school week runs from Monday to Sunday. So it's not Sunday to Saturday, which is the way the calendar works, but Monday to Sunday. That seems to be a common standard throughout academics. And so the class week for this week began on the 29th, which is Monday, and the class is available on Monday. And when we come to next week, well, we have Monday as a holiday, but it'll be Tuesday to Sunday, but it begins that day. So I don't think it'll be pretty much any. I may post something on Monday, but I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes. It's a holiday. I probably won't be answering email or anything like that. So we'll start on Tuesday. But that's the way the class works. And so we talk about like day 4, etc. That's Thursday because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Okay. The exams will be available on a Friday of the weeks that they're assigned. So there's a 3-day window: Friday, Saturday, Sunday, to take that exam, whatever time works for you in that exam window. The quizzes are available all week. The exams will be available Fridays, okay? And then I want to talk about discussions, and before I do that, does anybody have any questions for me about anything? I don't want to make sure that everyone is understanding what's happening. Okay, so if you do have questions, let me know. It's not a problem. Let's talk about discussions. This is probably the activity that I'll be the most involved in on a weekly basis. Every week there's a discussion. How you get to that is it's in Brightspace, and you go to coursework, the coursework tab in the upper left, and don't go to course content, go to discussions. And the reason I put it there is I know some instructors will embed the discussion within that course module. I mean, I guess I could, but I put it there because I like for all the discussions to be available on the same page, because sometimes people get engaged in dialogue with one another. And so if I put them in different course weeks, you probably won't go back and look at all the discussions. Now, you won't get credit for posting to a discussion that's long since expired, but you may want to just continue a dialogue with somebody and whatnot. It'll be easier to do that when they're all sort of, linked, back to back to back on the, from top to bottom on the discussions page. And so if you're having trouble locating, you just go to that same tab. It's just like a couple of clicks down from the content page. And so content, don't go to coursework content, go to coursework discussions. They'll introduction link, and it just asks you, this is a boilerplate kind of thing, just asks you what your name is and what you're majoring in, what you plan to do and whatnot. So just feel free to answer that. If you don't want to answer that, it's fine, it's not a problem. I didn't write that. I kind of think the question about what room in your house you use, to me that's, I don't know that I really care what room you're doing. That seems kind of a creepy question anyway, but just to let you know, I didn't write that, but it's sort of, I don't know, some people like it, some don't, but it's kind of boilerplate language. Feel free to tell us about yourself if you like and talk to others. That's a non-graded activity for this week. There is one, this is week 1 discussion. Economic life is this week's discussion. And it basically, this is a discussion that lets you discuss what you want to talk about. I deliberately made this sort of open-ended, more open-ended than what I usually do, because I'll sort of guide the discussion in every subsequent week. I'll have you respond to a particular topic that we're actually covering in class. But this week it's an introductory week. And I think it's the biggest economic issue right now. I gave some examples, like whether it's inequality or whether it's, I forget what I talked, climate change maybe, or inflation, whatever you think it is, it's up to you. But just give us some reason. Don't just, if you think unemployment's the biggest issue, tell us why. And why it's a big issue. This is, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So it does impact people. And one of the things that I noted in the discussion link itself was the fact that what makes economics interesting, at least to me, is the fact that we're all involved in economics. Unless you live in the middle of the woods somewhere, like one of those TV shows where people who live in Alaska, chop down their own trees for firewood and shoot animals and whatnot. I mean, there are people who do that, but don't trade with anybody. Then, I guess economics is not really that big of a thing that doesn't really apply to you. Most of us, it does. And so all these subjects are relevant in some way. And so I think that's what makes economics particularly relevant and not as abstract as what it might seem. We're all involved in it. We're all, in fact, affected by things like inflation and gas prices and interest rates, and all these things impact us. So tell us what you think is the main issue. Now, for this week and every week, day 4 is the due date of the original discussion applied. Now, there's a logic behind that, and I want to talk about how the week is sort of, and that is for the first 3 days or so, I've sort of set it up so that you can sort of read the material that's assigned. I wouldn't get too hung up with some of the chapter readings if you think that they're just a little bit advanced. In some cases, they will be. I think this is probably not the book that I would have chosen for this. We're probably going to make some change to that, but some of the examples are going to be pretty advanced. Don't get overly frustrated about that. But you want to spend some time covering that, thinking about your discussion plot, posting that one by day 4, and then post a response either to somebody who's replied to you or to something I've said or whatever. I tend to participate in the discussions as well, just to sort of guide the discussions, bring up topics that I think are interesting, maybe sort of guide the discussion and whatnot. But you want to make one other post besides that post on Thursday. Well, you can make it on Monday if you like. It doesn't matter. It's just by the end of the day, 11:59 p.m. And you just want to make it, and then post one other post sometime during the week, but on a different day than that Thursday. Okay, on a different day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever. You can do it. I've had students who get the whole thing out of the way by posting on Monday and then maybe show up again on Sunday. That's fine. Feel free to do that. But if you wait till Sunday, you're going to lose some points if you start participating, because number one, the original due date was Thursday for the initial reply, and then you have to post at least one other on some other day. So you're losing credits. You could talk about, and there are 10 points for each of these. So 15 weeks, 10 points is 150 points, 30% possible for the class. And so you'll lose a point if you're beyond that Thursday due date. And some of that also is about the quality of the text. Now there are two different, it's the same file, but one is on the main page in the announcements area, that what we call the landing page. There's a link called discussion guidelines, but you should be looking at and doing on the discussions. I also posted that in the discussions area itself. If you have any questions about that, feel free to. That link is not necessarily to post to. There's a blue hyperlink under all those, which is where you'll click on to make your discussion post. But you don't have to reply to that. Just it's mostly for your information. But what's going on here is I talk about this idea of what is a substantive post. And here's the thing that it makes it a little bit different than what you might be familiar with. This is a lot more, I don't want to make it sound like it's overly formal and it's like a term paper or anything. It is not. It's a paragraph, basically, at minimum. Now, if you want to go more than a paragraph, some students, I know, get really, really carried away. It goes on 5, 6, 8 paragraphs with references and citations. And I always think, well, that's fine if you want to do that, but it's really more work than what's being expected. It's not a paper. It's just your thoughtful insights into what we're doing this week, what we're covering, and what you think, and what you'd like to discuss. And what you want to do is avoid this idea of conversational posts, particularly on the replies to others. Unfortunately, what happens is there's a tendency to make that a little bit more conversational than it is substantive. And that's the big issue that I see with these subsequent participation replies. Participation, I think, is an important part of the course design because it allows students to be involved in the class, to talk with others, so that others understand, where you're coming from, and to dialogue. And the reason why I put the discussions available as in one link is so that people can look at each other, or talk to each other, and get to know one another, and maybe even make some acquaintances and some friendships that you may find valuable. One of the great things about college is you get to know a lot of people at times, to the extent that you're able to. And so that's one of the purposes of that, is to do that. So make sure that you post that by Thursday and then one other day during the week. But make sure it's not overly conversational. What I do see happening is sometimes somebody will pick up on someone's post and say, oh, you lived in Roswell. I used to live in Roswell for 2 years. Isn't that great? Where did you live? And so you've gotten 4 or 5 sentences in where you really haven't gotten into anything that has talked about economics. And so you want to sort of avoid that. I'm not saying you can't do that. Feel free to do that. That's okay. But don't make that all of what you're talking about. Give us a good 3 sentences at least about something that's related to the topic at hand. So that's what we're really getting at, is to avoid being overly chatty. I think that's really the term that we should, how I really want to say. Okay. And I'll try to give you as quick feedback as I can on those, so you'll know how it came out, what to expect, and whatnot. So that's really what's important there. So you can look at the grading for that. The deductions are mostly for issues of being too brief or too late or non-substantive. That's sort of what we're talking about there. Okay, so questions about the discussions and what we're doing with regard to those. I do have and somebody had reminded me just a few minutes ago that there's a transcription available of this. So here, maybe I am not very articulate, which is I'm accused of that at times. Down there as well. I kind of like that myself. I'm a person who has the transcripts at the bottom on TV all the time, just because I sometimes rather read and hear things, but that's available for you. Let's talk about the makeup policies and lates. So the only activity you cannot do in makeup is the discussions. And the reason for that, it's a class that's designed to have people involve themselves on a weekly basis. This is not a course We do have courses in which you can work at your own pace. You can do assignments, whatever you want to do, as long as you're done by a certain due date. But that's not what this class is. And so every week you want to be involved in the class, and that's why the discussions are important, is to make sure that you're there, you're engaged. If there's something that I think for students who don't do well in particular classes, and unfortunately there are always going to be a percentage of students who simply don't do well. It is unfortunate, but I think one of the reasons why, if you were to ask me, is the fact that they've somehow just gotten disengaged in the class for whatever reason. It just doesn't become a part of their routine. Maybe their life changes, they get busy, they have a different work schedule, different family responsibilities. It happens. And if it does happen, you will need to figure out what to do to try to make things work out for you, or to make a change, maybe talk to your advisor or whatnot. But frustrating, and sometimes people think they can't get back. In a weekly class session itself in real time, as well as the discussion activities, which are you can do those whenever. Tomorrow, Friday, whatever, hopefully you'll make your initial post to the week one discussion where you'll talk about what you think is the main economic problem sometime by the end of the day tomorrow. And so don't overthink that, just a good paragraph is all. You don't have to, there's no sourcing. You don't have to go look up a lot of sources online or whatever. Don't worry about that. You don't need quotes. And in fact, I would avoid quotes. I think I may have mentioned that in that discussion guidelines link. Sometimes people think they're being, well, that they're demonstrating good research skills by quoting authoritative sources. I don't know that really adds. It's more, we want sort of what you think and what your insights are. I think that's really what's most important. And by the way, for this week, there's no right or wrong answer as to, in fact, there's no right or wrong answer to a lot of these discussions. It's a lot of how you view things. And, but you'll be asked to sort of support your comments with what you've learned in the readings. They will be definitely tied to the topics that we're covering in the class. Okay, so for this week, if you think if it's unemployment or whatever, that's fine. But make sure it's about economics, and don't say something like, I don't agree with a designated hitter in baseball. That's not going to work, right? It's got to be something dealing with economics. And so try to stick with that if you are able to. So there's no quiz. You can take it, you'll lose 10% as just sort of a penalty, but you can do it as long if you get with me and say, hey, I need to do it. You've got a week in order to make up an exam. The final exam is going to be problematic because it comes toward the very end of the semester, and we've got a fairly tight turnaround in order to report final grades. But it is potentially possible for the exams, but I can make that available. It'll be in Brightspace. Because what happens is after the due date, it vanishes. You won't even be able to see it in your screen. So I'll have to make it available. If you do need to take an exam, a quiz or an exam as a makeup, let me know. But get with me as soon as possible so that we can make that happen. And I talked about the fact that exam 2 is just going to be problematic because we have a fairly, probably within a couple of days, and that's all we have in order to turn the final grades in. Okay. So, all right, so questions about that. It automatically in Brightspace, and so you should have your score right away. So that should be good. I think feedback to students is faster feedback is always better than slow feedback. And believe me, I was in college for 9 years myself, and so I know that I was always eager to get things back sooner rather than later. So I do understand the discussions. I will grade myself, and you'll get those back by the end of the following week when you've done it on time and whatnot. Okay, let's see here. So there's some. I don't want to go over all these because I know you can read, but there's not really much elaboration that I need to talk about. There are things about emergency procedures and whatnot. If you're here on campus and whatnot, there's the line to security. This is not really that applicable since this is an online class primarily. So. But you can read that if you like, smoke-free campus, all that good stuff. I don't think I really need to go over that. The COVID issue is something that, there's an addendum to the syllabus that we're required to post. You want to read, it particularly talks about this idea of, if you do come to campus, do a daily check health assessment. At some point, in the near future, I would imagine we will be having to do that, but right now we do. So if you do come to campus for whatever reason, please do that if you would. There's a link that's provided there for you to do it. It only takes a couple of minutes or a minute or two. It's no big deal, really. If you have some technical issues, there's some information as to how to contact our help desk, and they're usually pretty helpful, and we'll be able to give you some help and whatnot. If you're a veteran and require some services, that is available. There's also a Disability Resources Center, which I think they now call Accessibility Services, I believe. And so for those of you who require accommodation and you've got the requisite explanation on that, and you can make it, get with that with accessibility services. I shouldn't say story. It's not right. Whatever your situation is, you do have to present to them. I have nothing to do with that, other than the fact that I do comply with whatever I'm required to do, whatever your circumstances are. And we've had a number of students, and almost every semester we have those who require some accommodations, and it's easy. You'll find that we're easy to work with as far as that goes, I hope. Okay, let's talk about, if there are no questions, and feel free to sing out if you do, but I'd like to talk a bit about this idea of the schedule, what we're looking at here. So I've scrolled down, and if you would rather look at this on your own screen or have it printed out, that's fine. For this week, it's a fairly, we're just going to be talking a bit about an introduction to economics. I probably won't get through all the material I wanted to get through. And by the way, there's a PowerPoint link that I'll be providing. I didn't know actually what kind of format we were going to be, or what kind of room setup we were going to have, and whether I'd be able to project this on the screen or not. Frankly, I just didn't know until I got it yesterday. So I didn't post that, but I will. But what I'll be reading you today, you'll be able to see on your computer screen. But I'll post the actual link to that. It's a PowerPoint file, and I'll probably do that tonight or tomorrow. But you'll be able to see that. So you'll be able to follow along as to what we're talking about in class. So just kind of read the first chapter or skim it, that sort of thing, and then post it in the week one discussion sometimes by tomorrow if you haven't already done so. And then your second reply sometime before the end of the day or on Sunday. Notice our first quiz is next week. I'll probably make that available on Tuesday, since the week doesn't really start until Tuesday of next week. 9/6 is Tuesday, and that'll be due by the end of the week, which is the end of the week comes at 9/11. 9/9 is the Thursday, or is the Friday actually. Now notice it's usually a Thursday for the initial reply. If you scroll up to week 1, for instance, the initial reply is due 9/1, which is tomorrow. That's the Thursday. That's the day 4. Day 4 of this week is going to be on the Friday because we obviously lost a day for the holiday. But going forward, 9/15 is for week 3. That's a Thursday. And so just notice you've got those due dates that sort of come right across from the activity itself. The readings, and next week we have a quiz and a discussion. Week after that, there's no quiz, there's a discussion. And these are the topics we're going to be sort of covering. They'll sort of align with what we're talking about in the textbook. We'll talk about demand and supply, equilibrium. We have a quiz again on week 2. That'll be available. And by the way, what I'll do is every week, usually on that first day of class, I'll post a weekly announcement. Just giving you a heads up as what we're doing this week and say this is what's available, this is what we're covering, this is why it's important. Any kind of updates to the class, if there are any schedule changes or whatever, we'll talk about that. So they'll be available there. The schedule, I tend not to deviate too much from the schedule. Sometimes things do happen where you have to make a change, particularly if we're running behind. And I'll make that, if we're running behind in class, it'll mostly impact quizzes and maybe exams, but I don't expect there'll be a lot of that. I will be getting more into the class content itself next week. I'll do a little bit of it today, but I'll make those in the form of an announcement. You'll see it on the main screen, the main landing page in Brightspace. You'll also see the schedule in something called a weekly checklist. That's available in that weekly module under course content, coursework, course content, and it'll be on the left. So you'll see that. So it should be fairly easily viewable as to what we're doing. We'll be getting into theory here around 6 and 7. We'll talk more about what those theory bits are about. Some government policy, talking about how government fits into the economy and whatnot. maybe a chapter that will, or a topic that will bleed over into the next week after that. We'll have to see. So some of that will maybe cover after, we'll cut off whatever we don't cover for the exam that week, but weeks. Population growth. So this is where we get into this issue of economics as a social science. The social science aspects of this, I think, are important because, you know, what's the point of us studying economics if we are not really focusing on how it impacts us as individuals? And so I'll talk a bit about how we define economics as a social science, but certainly population growth is an issue we'll be talking. And we'll probably be presenting population growth, not so much for the fact that population is excessive, but population is located, if there's any problem with population, it's the fact that it's located in the wrong areas. A lot of times in areas where there's not enough water. We have that problem here in America, don't we? Where we've got a lot of people have been moving for years and years in parts of the country in which there's not as much water as there should be. I'm from the upper Midwest. Originally, we had too much water there. So I went to the Southwest, we had too little water. And so I guess I'm part of the problem, right? And so that is something we'll talk about. It's not population growth as we have too many people, it's we have too many people in the wrong places. And there are many parts of the world where water is such a big issue, and the lack of water primarily. And I would suspect it's going to be as big an economic issue as any other thing, bigger than maybe climate savings and healthcare. I think it's just a gigantic issue that we're only really starting to address. And but we'll talk a bit about that. I know if you study the econ courses at UNM, they're very big on, they've got a water resources program where they study water as you know, it sounds pretty mundane, but it's not really. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about this issue of distribution of income and wealth and why it's uneven and what the trends are in that, what can be done about it. Is it a problem? There are some people who, you know, if we want to talk about the fact that econ is controversial, there are some people who don't believe that's a problem at all. There are some people who believe it's the biggest problem, income and wealth distribution. So we're going to make the case that yes, it's a problem for the most part, and we'll see what the trends are in that. And we'll talk about what has been the remedy, or remedies, plural, I guess I should say, for those particular types of issues. We'll talk about pollution and as an economic problem, and what the economics of it are. I think we all know what pollution is, but we'll study from an economic standpoint what the costs of pollution are. And furthermore, not just what the costs of pollution are, but what the costs of cleaning up pollution are, and what the trade-offs are going to be that we have to face as societies in order to deal with pollution. I think we'll find that they're not as severe as what some people feared that they might be. So we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about the economics of crime. This is one of those social science topics that I think comes up again and again, and that is not just from the standpoint that we know we've got crime, and we know that you cannot even turn on the local news without having the first 15 minutes be one crime after another. I know that reporting has its criticism. There are a lot of people who think we should focus on other topics, but obviously crime is an issue. We'll talk about it from the economic standpoint. What are the economic damages that crime causes? What are the costs of it? I've lived in New Mexico about 20 years, I guess, and one thing I've heard consistently is that large employers have been concerned about locating in Albuquerque because of the crime issue. And Albuquerque, unfortunately, has gotten this reputation. And what are we to do about it? It's a big question. And it's not one with no simple answer, that's for sure. And it's very complicated, and it's one that we're going to have to try to figure out, I suppose. And so, yeah, I guess if you ask the journalists in Albuquerque why so much emphasis on that, it's because they think it's a big story. They definitely think it's a big thing to talk about. So, but we'll talk about it from the economic standpoint. What are the economics of crime in terms of property damage, in terms of the enforcement mechanisms, all the things that we have to put together as a society to try to deter, detect, prosecute crime. And my mother was a prosecutor, so I've got a pretty good feel for this whole thing from not hand experience, but from a secondhand experience of having her living with a prosecutor, which is something that not a lot of people would want to do, I think. But left open. And it's not because I ran out of ideas. That's not what this is. You know, I think, oh, he just ran out of things to talk about. No, I didn't run out of things to talk about. I wanted to make this open so that we could talk about very current events if we wanted to. If something came up that was of importance that we wanted to spend some time on, we could do that. And I'll give you an example. Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. In 2008, we had a financial crisis where the banking system was collapsing in on itself. And so, you know, that would have been a good opportunity for us to say, hey, what's going on? Because this is something that impacted everybody. Through the economy, the recession, unemployment went up. So people were worried about their bank being solvent and whether it would stay around, and some banks didn't stay around. So that would be an example of a topic. Another topic that I think is probably even more important was, just to give you an example, when I started teaching at the place I was before I came here, my first class was on September 10th, 2001, which was the day before the September 11th terrorist attacks. And I remember it was a macroeconomics course. We were talking about the fact that the U.S. had a large budget surplus. The government's taking in more money every year than what it spent. So as a result, what should the government do with all this money it was taking in? Pay off the national debt, give us a tax cut, do a little of both. All these things were options that we were talking about in that class the night before the terrorist attacks. The next day, obviously, the terrorist attacks in New York and Washington and Pennsylvania happened. So the whole landscape changed. We went into a recession. We no longer had surpluses. We had deficits, and we had all these issues come up that I didn't predict 9/11. I think most people did not. So, but those are some of the topics that we would need and be able to talk about these current economic events. And so, and if we're running behind also with some of these, we've got time to cover those. And so I did want to sort of leave this a bit open-ended. That's one of the beauties of the survey class, is it allows us this opportunity for flexibility. Okay. And then the final bit here is the final exam in week 15. That's toward the very end of the semester, okay? Or at the very end, it'll be available on that. I'll probably make that available the entire week, mostly because the final exam week, a lot of people have a lot going on. So I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to take that. So, so are there questions about the schedule and what we're doing? I know I spent a lot of time talking about this. And I get that, but I want to make sure that everyone is familiar with what's going on. And if you have questions, feel free to shoot them at me now, and I'll be more than glad to take your questions. We got about 15 minutes left, and so we've got plenty of time. We're not really in any hurry. I'm not trying to force the issue a lot. I know that I tend to look at the clock a lot when I'm in class, and I just simply do that so that I can keep abreast of where we are. So I know to keep moving or whatever. So anyway, I'll be posting these PowerPoint slides later today or tomorrow, something like that. In the Brightspace, it'll be in that week's module, and you can click for yourself, save them, print them, do whatever you like with them. That's entirely up to you. But I want to sort of go over this and sort of get into some of the course content here so that you are sort of acclimated to what we're doing. And so what is economics? And I sort of phrased this very first slide here as a sort of Q&A, and that is, the question is, what is economics? So I'll give you a definition. I guess it's sort of a textbook definition, and it's defined as a social science dealing with choices made under conditions of scarcity and uncertainty. And I think there are a lot of textbooks would probably just cut off the sentence right here after scarcity, but I've sort of added this term of uncertainty here, because I think where a lot of economic research is going right now, particularly in the field of what we call microeconomics, which is the study of individual markets, and we'll talk a bit more about that either today or next week. There's a lot of discussion about the fact that there's some things we know, and there's some things we don't know. And, and the things that we don't know are probably more dangerous than the things that we do know. We do know a lot about inflation. We pretty much know what to do about inflation as an economic problem. And because of that, even though these are being given by the Federal Reserve, which is our nation's central bank that controls our money supply, they're raising interest rates to the point where the mortgage business is really coming to a screeching halt because people aren't applying for loans because rates are higher. But it's to bring out the inflation in the system. We pretty much know that. But what about something like, how do we deal with economics of pandemic? This is really current information, right? you know, I don't think there are probably too many of us who've lived through a global pandemic. The last one we had was the flu that was worldwide around 1918, which actually lasted a couple of years beyond that, probably exacerbated by a world war, which was going on at the time. But that was and I don't know too many people who were around in those days. And certainly nobody who was running anything economically was around. So what do we do about that? And, you know, and there's been plenty of criticism all the way around to our political leaders as to should they have done this, should they have done that, a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking and whatnot. And I generally think that the political leaders have done a pretty adequate job, for the most part, given the fact that they didn't know what they didn't know. And nobody knew how long it would take to get our arms around the pandemic, to get people vaccinated, you know, and whatnot, to get people back to work, to get people feel comfortable going out again, to get the economy moving in that direction. How much stimulus to apply to the economy? Was it too much stimulus? Those were all questions that arise because of the fact we just didn't know what we didn't know. And so uncertainty is an important aspect of this. But I want to talk about this idea of social science. Economists are very adamant about placing us within the social sciences by saying that, look, economics really works best and is understood when we understand that it deals with people and society and the choices that we're making, and really do have real world implications to real people. And again, I come back to the idea that I talked about both in the discussion activity in Brightspace, as well as a few minutes ago, that what is the point of studying all of this at all unless it makes our lives better? There's no point of studying unless we want to do something about it. What's the point of studying dentistry unless we want to solve dental problems? Or why study engineering? Why study any of this unless we're trying to make our lives better? And I think there's a lot of evidence that economic study has made our lives better. And I'll give you some evidence. You don't need to take my word for it. I'll give you some evidence that shows that understanding economic policy has avoided lots and lots of the economic problems that were just brutal throughout most of the early part of this nation's history. Boom and bust cycles, not just recessions, but depressions, one after the other, bank failures, one after the other. And a lot of it arose because of uncertainty. And I think that solving the uncertainty problem for the benefit of society has been to the good. Now, scarcity is important too. I think, as I mentioned a minute ago, I think a lot of textbook definitions sort of ends, yeah, let's talk about scarcity. Well, okay, we will, but I do bring up this uncertainty angle, but scarcity really is sort of at the heart of this because, like uncertainty, if nothing was scarce, then I guess there really wouldn't be a need to talk about economic distribution of income and wealth and resources and all that, because it would be available to us. If it were no more difficult to get dinner than walking up to your microwave and saying, you know, whatever, ham sandwich, and boom, it, like on Star Trek, where the computer just simply whips it up, anything you want, a pair of Nike tennis shoes, boom, they are whipped up, then I guess we wouldn't really be talking about economics as a thing, because there really wouldn't be an issue of scarcity and distribution. As wealthy and live as large as we like. But unfortunately, there is scarcity, and that's the world in which we live. We are living in a world of less scarcity, however. And so we'll talk about the issue of wants versus needs, because that's sort of where this naturally goes. But let's give a bit of a definition as to scarcity, but we all sort of know what we're talking about here. And that is, scarcity. So the definition that I got from the dictionary is it's the quality or state of something being scarce. Well, that's not particularly useful, but I do like this wanted provisions for the support of life. And I really like this definition: deficient in quantity number compared with the demand. Now we get into some economic terms. Deficient in quantity compared to the demand. That is, our demands, our wants exceed our grasps. And that, I think, is the issue of scarcity, and the idea that there is never really enough. And I think the evidence is overwhelming the fact that things are never enough for us, because look at this, something like healthcare, for instance. If we were to solve and arrive at a cure for all cancers, and I know cancer is not one thing, it's a lot of many different diseases, but if we could figure out a way to deal with all cancers, would we shut down all research and say, okay, we're done, all cancer researchers go home and do something else, go work at Target or whatever? No, I don't think so. I think they would simply redeploy it to something else, some other healthcare problem. There would be something else to do. And we have been successful in dealing with diseases that were once very much a threat to mankind. I know my grandparents used to have to worry about swimming in the summertime because that's how you got polio. To the point where my grandmother was afraid of us going to the pool to swim when I was a kid, even though that was not how you didn't get polio by swimming in pools. You got it from whatever was bacteria or whatever the organisms were that were found in lakes and rivers. But that was in her head, this is how you get polio. Well, polio has been largely eradicated. There are still cases that we hear of, but for the most part, that's not something of a worry. So we don't have to worry about that particular issue at all. But you get the idea that we have not stopped solving other medical problems. And we'll talk a bit about healthcare economics. That may be one of the topics that we talk about as we get deeper into the class. But yeah, that scarcity is there. It's a real thing. It's something that we have to deal with because it really presents us with an issue of what do we do in order to, once we solve one problem, do we move on to the next problem? And then I want to talk about this issue of what's called the economy. This is not, I don't know if this is in your book or not. Maybe it may not be. I'm not really sure offhand, but the economizing problem, excuse me, the economizing problem is considered to be the sort of the central issue in economics. And it's the main thing. And that is, it's the conflict between the unlimited wants of society and the reality of scarce resources. Excuse me, society's unlimited wants and scarce resources. Sorry about that. So we talk about, excuse me. Apologize for that. I had it. My husband's sort of acting up a little bit today. So this is what the economizing problem is all about. This idea that we've got a conflict between the fact that we've got unlimited wants, unlimited demands, but our wants are greater than what we have available for us. And so as a result, this economics comes into play. Now we'll talk a bit about what the resolution of this is. Where do we go from here? How do we deal with these unlimited wants? How do we solve our needs? And then more importantly, is the issue of wants versus needs. And that is, there's always a question about, have we solved our basic needs? And that now the whole issue of economics is about what our wants are. And I think that's really an important question. And I think a lot of economists and a lot of people in general, even non-economists, would say, yeah, our needs are mostly taken care of. That, yeah, maybe there's one exception, and that may be healthcare. It's an area that we're not, perfectly healthy, all of us. And, the fact is that, some of things like asthma, like I do, but, we're not all perfectly healthy, and there are always going to be some issues that arise there. But we've pretty much handled things like food, clothing, and shelter, those kinds of issues there. And so we're really on to wants. And I think if you measure total economic output in the economy, there may be some justification for that. That we spend a lot more money on not just basic homes and whatnot, but large homes and larger and luxury items within the homes, things like satellite TV, internet, and nice furniture and whatnot, and all the latest appliances, and then lots and lots of clothing. And so the fact that we've been able to expand the things we have sort of suggests to a lot of people that if you take a look at all the spending in our economy, it's on things like clothes and vehicles and things that maybe we don't really need, but we've sort of covered those basic needs. Now it's mostly on the wants. And so a lot of the spending we have on luxury items. And so those are really wants and not really needs. And so as a result, is that really where we are? Now, I don't know that we can say with a lot of certainty that all of our needs are satisfied, but I think there's some evidence for the fact that a lot of them are satisfied and that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that in the industrial world, it's mostly about satisfying what our wants are. Now, I say that in the industrialized world, as opposed to the rest of the world, and this is one of the things that I really want to talk about in this class. It's going to be a sort of recurring theme, is that in the so-called developed world, the US, Europe, parts of East Asia and whatnot, where we mostly had gotten a lot of these needs satisfied. Again, healthcare being sort of that one exception where we're still growing and learning and all that. For the most part, a lot of our spending and our production and consumption both are on these items that are more wanted than needed. But in the rest of the world, maybe a good half of the world's population or more, it's about mostly this idea of basic needs, that those needs are not covered. And as a result, we've got lots of starvation, and we've got lots of people who don't have their basic needs. And yes, healthcare is maybe one area of needs deficiency that we have, but it's even worse in those areas where there are parts of the world in which you could die from mosquito bite, you could die of dehydration or starvation. These are not good things for social scientists to have to deal with. We probably prefer not to have global poverty, but we do. And so from a global standpoint, there are lots of needs that are being met. And this idea of this division between the haves and the have-nots, I think, is a really important area for us to focus on in this class. And it's one that is really going to take us a long way, I hope, and to sort of lay out for everybody this idea that we do have differences in standard of living, in standards of living throughout the world. And we'll be talking a bit more about what standards of living are all about and whatnot. So as to the economizing problem, it's this conflict, this idea that we want, and yet we've still got scarcity. That's why we have markets. And so the final thing I'll talk about here, because we're almost out of time, is what is the solution to this economizing problem? And again, I'll post these PowerPoint slides for you a bit later. What's the solution? And we're going to say the solution is the market system. Or the free market system, to be more specific. And that is a system that operates more or less without excessive government restraints, allows people to be producers, to be consumers, to engage in activities that they want to engage in, for the most part. And it tends to do a pretty good job when markets operate efficiently. Now, they don't always operate efficiently. I want to make clear at the outset that this is not a particular point of view that says, hey, markets always work efficiently and that they always solve all the world's outcomes. And so government should have nothing to do with it whatsoever. We should just let markets do their thing. There are plenty of economic voices and voices in politics that have said that over the years. And I think that's difficult to support given what we know about markets. Sometimes markets do have difficulties. Markets do break down. Markets need a bit tweaking. But for the most part, when they operate efficiently, they do deliver a solution to the economizing problem. That is the idea that we produce what we want to consume, and we consume what is produced for us. And we'll talk about this interplay between supply and demand, between production and consumption, and what that's all about. But it does result in a solution, however imperfect, to the markets, to the problem of this conflict between unlimited wants and needs versus scarce resources. And so when we define a market, we're going to talk about some organized means by which people exchange value. So I deliberately use the word people here, as opposed to this more sort of sterile term of producers and consumers and whatnot, because we are talking about interactions of people and dealing with each other and exchanging goods and services back and forth, including labor and including money itself as financial capital. And we're going to talk much more about it. So what I'll probably do is this is probably a good jumping off point for where we begin our discussion next week, is talking a bit about market systems. And so I'm going to talk next week about production and consumption. We'll talk a little bit about economic actors and who's who, so that we know we have this idea of identifying terms and roles and whatnot, and we'll spend some time going over those. So are there questions for me about anything that we've talked about so far today, about where we've gone here? Well, okay. Well, I enjoyed our first class session. Hopefully you did as well. And I will make this video available as a link to you sometime probably later in the day today. For those who weren't able to attend, for whatever reason, joined late, couldn't get the link to the class, whatever, I'll make that available. But this is a class that, unlike the Attend Anywhere classes, we can view these on Sunday or Monday next week or whatever. These are real-time classes every week. And so we're doing it this time just because we still have some late enrollees. So in the meantime, between now and when we meet next, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm here, I'm available, and eager to help you. And so I hope everybody has a nice rest of your week. And have a great 3-day weekend, and I'll see you next time.